History has proven over and over that strong and free nations will always prevail over tyrants who oppress their people.
All right, President Trump there with those remarks in Tokyo as he begins his trip to Asia. Now, the question is, with that tough talk on North Korea, will our allies really step up in the fight? From the Heritage Foundation, we have Dean Cheng with us, Asian Studies Senior Fellow. Dean, good to see you. Thank you very much for coming on here. The president said, hey, my rhetoric, some people say it's tough, but I'm sticking with it, paraphrasing, of course, but he's taking that show on the road. What's the goal, do you think? What can he accomplish on this trip when it comes to North Korea?
Well, I think the goal is to, one, reaffirm to our allies the firmness of our commitment. It is to try and get the Chinese to get on board, to sustain the pressure that they're putting on North Korea. They've done a couple of things that we have never seen before. But above all, it's to send a warning to Pyongyang that basically it can't go down this sustained path, that eventually it is going to have to come to terms with us and its neighbors.
Come back to China. They've done some things, as you say, that we've never seen before. So talk about what's been done so far, but also what more we need from the Chinese, what more they might be willing to give, and what the president will be pushing for once he goes there.
Well, this administration has imposed a number of sanctions, secondary sanctions, on Chinese entities, on Chinese banks, Chinese businessmen. So as a result, the Chinese government has ordered all joint ventures between Chinese and North Korean companies suspended, and it's pretty much warned Chinese banks to stop dealing with North Korea. The question here is, how long is China going to keep those measures in place? In the past, they've imposed similar sorts of things, never on the joint venture side, but they've tried to restrict business. And then about 6 months to a year later, they just quietly sort of fade away. So I think if President Trump can get the Chinese to keep the pressure on for a full year, better yet 2 or 3, that I think is definitely going to leave a mark on North Korea.
What do they just, I guess they just hope we take our eye off the ball, right? Stop paying attention to it, and that's worked in the past?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So
in the past, in the past, we basically haven't kept up the pressure. In the past, we always hailed, oh my gosh, the Chinese made an announcement, that's all that matters. And then when the Chinese stop enforcing it, nobody really sort of reminds the Chinese that North Korea is still developing nuclear weapons.
What's your assessment of how this president has handled all of this? I think a lot of, as I said at the top of our conversation, a lot of the attention has been on his rhetoric and what he said and what he's tweeted. But what about policy-wise? As you say, there have been some things that are tangible, especially when it comes to China. How has the administration handled this problem, really big problem?
I think when we look at what the administration has actually done, it's actually fairly impressive. It has put in place a series of economic sanctions. It has pushed North Korea's banks off the international finance network so they can't transfer money around. It has really put sanctions onto the Chinese and North Korean businessmen, something Congress demanded the previous administration do and the previous administration refused.
Right.
So we're actually seeing a bite taken out of North Korea's businesses. It's also managed to persuade a number of countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America to suspend relations with North Korea, which, again, has a real business implication because North Korea used those conduits to bring hard currency, badly needed hard currency, to fund its missile and nuclear program into North Korea.
So then, Dean, how will we know if this policy is working? How will we know that it has, quote unquote, worked, that we've won this round? How will we know that?
Well, I think that we saw Kim Jong-un, for example, at one point threaten to fire missiles at Guam. And in a very rare display of common sense, he actually pulled that measure back. Now he's openly talked about doing an above-ground nuclear test, something nobody's done since, I think, the late 60s or early 70s. So if we don't see that kind of a test, which could lead to radiation going around the world, that would probably should be considered a step back because they've just recently said, oh, no, we might actually do this.
Right, so that'll be the test. All right, we have to move on right now, but Dean, thank you. Dean Cheng on the president's trip, which continues after Japan to South Korea and China. We appreciate it. Good insight. Next up, this move Amazon has made. We talked a little bit about it earlier that it could impact a lot of people that are shopping over the